Turning our focus now to India's second largest state by GDP, Tamil Nadu, which accounts for about 9% of India's GDP. It recently emerged from elections with the new DMK government at the helm, and in about 2 months' time, the new government will present an amended budget. Let's discuss how with Tamil Nadu's Finance Minister Palanivel Thiagarajan, who joins us exclusively from Chennai. Dr. Rajan, good to have you with us. First of all, give us a sense of how the state has been impacted by COVID. Quantify it for us.
Well, I think, we have been devastated economically. The medical costs have been at a personal level very high, but at a societal level, not nearly as bad as the rest of India. We had a better medical infrastructure than most, from number of doctors per capita to hospitals to infrastructure. But like every other part of the world, our economy has shrunk for the first time in decades. And we are trying to cope as best as we can with the second wave that is many times the magnitude of the first wave. And we seem to be on the cusp of getting it under control.
Well, the priority right now for most governments is supporting the people, supporting the economy. You're on the cusp of presenting a new budget. What would be the priorities?
Well, I think the important thing for politicians is to marry your economic philosophy with your political philosophy. And in our case, that has always been one of social justice and financial inclusion. So from that perspective, unlike some other state governments or the union government, we have focused a lot about getting cash into the hands of the poorest, weakest sections of society, the unorganized sector that has been disproportionately affected, and to bring demand back up. Now, there are different theories of how one should proceed in such circumstances, but our economic and our political philosophy dovetail when we say try and get demand back up and get spending power back into the hands of the people that have been affected most. So that will reflect in the amended budget. As you know, an original budget or interim budget was already presented by the outgoing government, and we have to amend it.
Dr. Rajan, would you be looking for new revenue streams to meet some of these COVID-related expenses? Your government has stakes in companies like Titan, Ramco Cement. Any interest in selling your stake there?
Yeah, I think we have a structural problem that I've been talking about as an opposition legislator for 5 years, that our revenues as a percentage of our GSDP have dropped dramatically from somewhere around 10.5 states-owned revenues and about 4% in our share from central taxes. We are now down to about 7% in our states-owned revenues and 10.5 and 3.5 or 3 from the central government to the union government. So we have a structural problem that we need to fix. Of course, we need a one-time kind of, restructuring of our debt because the interest burden has become so high. I'm not as worried about the debt burden because we are a large state. We have enormous assets. The state is the biggest owner of land. And as you say, there are easily liquidatable, market valuable assets that we can exit in very efficient and scale transactions if we need to. But my concern is about fixing the structural problem so we don't have this vicious cycle. We have now reached a point in the last 5 years where we are borrowing to cover revenue deficits, and not just revenue deficits, but actual non-discretionary costs like interest payments and salaries. And that is something we cannot sustain. And we will not use asset sales as a substitute. It is only a one-time thing for restructuring. We need to fix the plumbing first. Of course, that's hard to do in the middle of a pandemic, but we will focus on that for the next 5 years of our term.
So how do you improve your liquidity then? I mean, you mentioned that is an issue for the state. If it's not borrowing, what are certain plans that you have for fundraising?
No, I don't think I ever said that liquidity was an issue. A large state like us has almost infinite access to borrowing. We are only at about 25.5%, 26% debt to GDP. So we are a good